Hello, I'm Jackie Walker, and it's my pleasure today, as always, whenever I speak to Tom Evans, to be interviewing him about writer's block. So it's beating blocks and fostering flow, which is a wonderful way to put it. And Tom, of course, is an absolute genius at this. In fact, he's a genius at very many things. He's often called the wizard. Tom, in order to help your listeners, viewers, and whatever we've got here, understand exactly how you know what you're talking about. Could you tell us a little bit of your background and let us know what brings you to this place?
Well, I think first of all, Jackie, I'll have to readjust the video settings so my head has just expanded. You're making it bigger and bigger. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Yeah, well, my journey as a writer was like, I suppose, like many writers, it was unexpected. You know, you can't plan this journey at all. And it just arrived one day. In fact, it arrived on a 747 halfway across the Atlantic. We're going on holiday, and this book just arrived. I wasn't planning to write it. And it's called 100 Years of Ermintrude. It's about a woman that lives to 100, and it's written in poetic stanzas of snapshots. Wrote it all on a single flight. Got back to the UK after the holiday. Published it. People loved it. It became I started as an ebook. In those days, you didn't have Kindle, so it's just a PDF. Then I made it a print book. Then I made it an audio book. Then it became an iPhone app. And it ended up with me walking around London in a bra for 26 miles as well, which you don't expect as a writer. The reason for that was it mentioned breast cancer, and the Walk charity picked it up, which is great. And it propelled me into a new career. At the time, I was a board IT consultant, and then people started approaching me saying, "Well, Tom, you've written a book. Can you help me write a book?" So I said, "Fine." And I found that about 50% of the people I worked with, because I'm quite a creative spark, would get on and do it and complete, but 50% wouldn't. And I don't like that sort of stat. I like 100% stat. So I went and did some training because I had no tools as a coach to help people get through these creative blocks. And I did some NLP and some hypnotherapy, some regression therapy, and I found I got pretty good at getting people through their stuckness. But what I did find in all cases, in 100% of cases of writer's block, is actually a life block masquerading as a writer's block.
Yes, yes, it can't really be separate, can it?
No.
And I suppose sometimes those specific blocks are actually what draw people to do the writing in the first place.
Yeah, well, I ended up working with a lot of people using the writing as catharsis. So I'd work with people that had had some trauma in their life, and we'd do the writing as getting rid of that trauma and facing it. And often I use lots of tricks like taking the book from being in the first person to the second person or third person, and even changing the name. You know, so if they're writing about themselves, I say, well, write about someone else. Or even in some cases, one lady I worked with recently wrote about a family of mice. Lovely story, Heart of a Mouse, which is just great, and it was about her journey, but she completely transcribed it into this family of mice, and now she's off and running with a whole series of books. Now she's got this lovely metaphor with illustrations and stuff like that, because she could associate with the emotion without getting stuck with it and without it dragging her down and stopping her writing it.
It would also allow, assumedly, for people who've got stories that they don't want to actually talk about they don't want to drag other people in. So it allows them to explain their story without naming and shaming or joyfully sharing.
Exactly. In this case, you know, the relationship with her parents. I worked with another lady where we used a family of elephants because she was talking about her mother and her relationship with her daughter. So, and elephants, of course, have got a very matriarchal society. I know that you're an expert in all things matriarchal as well, Jackie, with your wonderful mothering revolution.
Thank you. Yes, it's quite a story, and many people do, and they are awkward ones to write, some of these. And tell me, so you're 50%, and these life blocks. Isn't it interesting? Don't you find that life blocks can often be the life step that we need, which just breaks us through? And
yeah.
so yeah, it's a big gift that you're bringing.
And that's one of the big techniques as well. So one of the big techniques that I encourage people to do is to thank their blocks, to embrace it and say, great, a block's come up. I've got something to learn from and evolve from. It's not there to drag me down. It's there to allow me to blast through to the other side. And once you see your blocks as allies, really, and all they are is protectors, they're just protecting you from doing something that might cause you some grief. And a great example of that is you've had an essay marked when you were a child, and you got a bad mark for it, and therefore are writing like essays of today, aren't they? And we don't want to get bad marks and bad reviews. So the best way to avoid getting bad marks is not to submit your homework, and then you get a rap on the knuckles. Or in this case, it's to not publish your book, and you get a metaphorical rap on the knuckles for it sticking on your hard drive.
Do you know, that is really funny, especially this morning, because I posted within my small community group, growing community group in the Mothering Revolution on Facebook. And it was an old meme that I had written about being more than anything I'd ever been led to believe was important, which is absolutely true. However, I spelt lead, L-E-A-D. Oh. And one lady wrote and said, by the way, you spelt lead wrong. And I said, I am more than a spare A. which is, it was absolutely, L-E-D is how I should have spelt it, allegedly. And I said I was more than a spare A. Absolutely living within, not getting dragged down and going, oh dear me, what a shame. I'm embarrassed because I spelt something wrong. But carrying on with the theme of the story, it was quite a nice one.
Well, lead, it also means to lead, doesn't it, as well as to lead people down. So, and that's great about perspective, and that trick I mentioned about changing something from the first person to the third person, it makes it very accessible. And I've worked a lot with dyslexic authors as well, where their issue is like neurology wiring, and there's loads of exercises I learned to help people get the left and right brains working together. One being mind mapping, and the other doing the audio version. But there's one lady I work with, all the way through her book, she'd spelt the word I with a in lowercase. And it reminded me of J.D. Salinger and Catcher in the Rye, where the words are all over the place. And I thought, let's just leave it in as a small I, because it kind of it referred to an earlier version of her and not the capital I she became.
I quite like that.
Yeah. So I love playing with language, and by having fun and seeing this thing as the block as an opportunity, not adversity that's come to visit you, it's the best way to get through it. To get through this possible pain of being ridiculed. Well, just have fun with it. Make spelling mistakes on purpose, and then it doesn't matter how many are in there.
Well, that's a different way. That you'll give some proofreader a heck of a job to do that one.
Oh, I remember when my first non-fiction book, I wrote some things in there where the sentence structure was purposely hypnotic to create induced trance in the reader. So the reader had to, and she tried to this proofreader editor that came with the publisher tried to unwire this stuff. I said, you can't do that. The repetition of the word that I've done, the way that I've closed the sentence in a slightly clumsy way is purposeful.
That's interesting. But they're given that they're life blocks, there aren't a sort of roughly so many life blocks that people can have. Well, there are lots even more, but they actually usually disseminate and boil down to certain things. Have you found there's a pattern?
Yeah, I think there's about 4 or 5 different types of blocks, and sometimes somebody's got like more than one. So maybe 20% of one, 30% of something, and 50% of another one. But there's the fear of ridicule, which is this idea of someone's going to call you an idiot, so therefore you just don't publish things. There's the fear of the unknown, which is you don't want to go into this new territory because where is it going to lead you? There's the fear of failure, and the best way of not failing is not to try. And then there's 2 strange fears. So those 3 fears tend to plague writers and stop them in their creative tracks. But there's another couple of fears that stop authors that are published. And maybe we need a new term called author's block. So this isn't writer's block. This is, I published my book, and now I'm a bit afraid I won't promote it, or I don't know how to promote it because I'm a creative, not a marketeer. And I found myself in this loop. The 2 fears, by the way, are the fear of success and the fear of being magnificent.
Oh, and they're different. How
They
nice.
are. Well, success is just sort of getting to one platform, and then magnificence has really been on the soapbox and been known for our work and our art,
Yeah,
and changing lives, changing minds, all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
So, what I discovered, I've now done 12 books, and about 3 or 4 books in, I got into this mad, frenetic, oh, I'll just write another book, I'll just write another book mode. And it doesn't matter if that book's not a success, because the next one will be a success, and the next one will pick the other one up by its bootstraps and stuff like this. So I didn't realise at the time I was in author's block mode, and wasn't writer's block, 'cause I could just create and create and create. But I'd write a book and then I wouldn't promote it, and then write another book and I wouldn't promote it, or promote it properly, I should say.
Yeah, I can see that absolutely, and that's nearly the same as having all these all the books that have never been published at all, still sitting on hard drives.
Exactly, yeah, and actually, in my case, it was very specifically fear of success, because I did a session with somebody on it, and I'd been financially successful in my previous incarnation as an entrepreneur and businessman. I'd been financially successful twice, and in those 2 times, I was also the most stressed I'd ever been. So I'd kind of unconsciously linked success and stress together. And I had this lovely session with this lady, and what we did was we reframed success as being successful without the stress.
Mm.
Yeah, which is lovely. And then since then, things started to flow a lot better for me.
Yeah, yeah. So, the author's block, the learning, the marketing, because really that's quite a chunky thing for people to do, but you can make it fun, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, marketing's one of these things that you heard that phrase that people say about marketing. I know that 50% of my marketing works, but I don't know which 50% it is. And a lot of marketing tends to be scattergun, and we see this thing. We do so and so on Twitter. Oh, now go to Instagram. Now go to Pinterest. Now go to Blab. Now go to Periscope. Now go to and we think that the next social media craze is the solution for us, and all the other ones are rubbish. So, in a way, that's also trying to jump the gun. And you go over to these new platforms, and funnily enough, all the people you knew on the old platform are there. So you're actually not getting to a new audience at all. So what I discovered, because I was in this frenetic mode of just writing and not actually promoting, was I needed to have a new relationship with my marketing, and as you say, to have fun with it and to be creative with it, because I'm deliciously creative when I'm writing a book, but then I'd get bored or kind of grumpy if I had to market it, and so now what I do is I just have fun with the marketing. So the books have, if you don't mind the pun, books have long shelf lives. And nowadays we can put them in loads of different formats. So I'm currently going back over my back catalogue and re-recording them as audiobooks, which is the most amazing thing. And funnily enough, one I'm re-engaging with my work again in a way, and remembering stuff I wrote ages ago, because I write in trance, so I can't remember what I write, but I'm also bringing it out to a new audience that wants to consume it as audiobooks. Plus, a lot of my books have meditations that accompany the books. And so I can actually put the meditations in the audiobook, which is great. And right now, I've got to tell you, my audiobook sales are outstripping my print and Kindle by about 3 to 1, which is amazing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's interesting you're mentioning the meditation, because I would imagine that meditation itself is one of the key areas for overcoming blocks, isn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of is how you get into that flow state, because when you're in the block state, what's happening is there's a little voice inside your head saying, I'm not good enough, I don't want to do this. Or another thing that happens is you become creatively uncreative, doing everything else you should do apart from writing the book. And when people are in that mode, it's the sure sign that procrastination is in operation. And I got into this mode where there was a huge gap between my first book and my second book, because I had a script in my head saying, it doesn't matter if I don't have a bestseller so long as one of my clients does.
Okay.
Now, how useful is that? Because with bestseller experience, you can then give that to clients as well. So I deleted that script and got this second book out, and then there was just this absolute flow of books. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Meditation was the key for me, and the reason for that is because the normal human mind can only hold one thought at a time.
Yes, it's a lovely thing to think, isn't it?
Isn't it? Well, if you think about the thing you're thinking about, then that thought gets replaced by the thought you're having about that thought.
yeah, you literally cannot think two things at once.
Yeah. Well, actually, to be fair, a shaman taught me a trick where you can do two. Because one of the things about the normal human mind is it's very elastic, and there is a way of running multiple thought streams. But let's not go there. That's for a different
No,
conversation.
no, we're trying to no, no.
Exactly. But anyway, so yeah, the normal human only has one thought. So if you're thinking about what you did yesterday, or let's say you had a conversation that didn't go very well, and it's going round and round your head, or you're worried about where you're going to publish a book, so that's well, no one's going to like it. That takes you out of your creative flow. Okay, and so what I advise people to do is that they always meditate before they start writing, and I've got a lovely meditation which I'm sharing as a freebie with members of the Alliance of Independent Authors as well, which allows you to get into the flow state with your eyes open. And a magical thing happens then, which is you'll appreciate, is that when I'm writing. So right now we're doing this recording. I've got my phones off. I've just noticed that my email's on, so I'm just going to switch that off so it doesn't beep. So there you go. All these are all good practices, obviously, for when we're creating. Make sure you've got things switched off so they're not going to annoy you. And I noticed that I'd finished writing. I normally write between about 8:30 in the morning and 11, and I'd finish writing, and then the phone would ring. That's interesting. And I wouldn't have to disconnect the phone; it would just ring. And I found out that what's happening is when you're emitting thoughts about someone. So let's say I'm thinking about you. You may think about me. I think, well, I must give Tom a call. I'll just ring him up. Just came into my mind, and you get interrupted. But when you get into the eyes open meditative state, you create what I call an interruption barrier around you, and that's one nice bonus. The other big bonus is time extends. You stretch time, and you get more things done in less time.
So actually, time will extend not only because of lack of interruption and focus, but actually it like your mind can become elastic.
It does, and a good example of that, if you're in a doctor's waiting room and you read all the magazines and the doctor's late, then time seems to stretch into eternity. Whereas if you're a weekend having fun with friends, then it goes far too quickly. And what I did, I studied the neurology of our time perception, some fantastic book by a guy called Ian McGilchrist. And the latest neuroscience is just amazing. It's not that our left brain is logical and right brain is creative. There's creative sides of the left brain and there's logical sides of the right brain. But it looks like the left brain sits inside space and time and the right brain sits everywhere and everywhen else. And so what I've done is I created loads of, using I studied yoga and breathing techniques, and I had loads of ways of actually getting the left and right brain to work together at the same time. And when you enter that whole brain state, you end up in this extended time state, and I've called it EMT. The time zone is called EMT, not GMT, and it's the extended me time state.
How lovely! See, there you are playing with words yet again.
And that's the thing. When you start to play with words and make your own language up, because as you know, I wrote this book on mindfulness, and I called it Mindful, Timeful, and Kindful. And the idea being, and it all came from my early research in how to get into the flow state as a writer. And what I discovered is that when you practice mindful meditation, it generates more time. When you've got more time, it generates more time for you to be kind to yourself first and then kind to others. So it's a lovely way to be, and it was a joy to write that book of how to do it.
Yeah, I can see that. And when it comes to meditation, it doesn't mean that people just have to sit, lie down, or whatever in their space. They could actually go outside or do something and learn to just quieten the mind. Like, for example, before we came to do this interview, I went for a walk and I was enjoying the bird. I mean, the bird song was so loud that I was unable to think anyway.
But the other way around, if your internal mind talk is loud, you wouldn't hear the bird song.
Oh, right. Okay, I hadn't thought that way round.
Yeah. And so if you're going, oh poor me, I've got this chapter to finish by 11 o'clock, there's no way I'm going to do it in time, I wish I'd not started this book. If that sort of conversation's going on inside, then you'll be a bit stuck. The flip side is you enter this, let's say, the eyes open meditative state, which you can do when you're out walking. We do naturally when we're out walking, because the movement of walking moves the fluid around in our brain from left to right and gets us into this whole brain state, which is why it's so good. Same with running and jogging, this sort of stuff. And so when you're in this state, what you then notice the outside world. And of course, as a writer, where is our inspiration coming from? Well, some of it's coming internally, especially if we get into the channeling state. But when you're out there, I've got 3 dogs, and if I get stuck, I'll just take them out for a walk. And I notice things in nature that I can use that as a metaphor in the book. That's what I was just looking for. But when I was stuck at my computer writing, I was never going to find that broken gate, which I can now use as a metaphor in the book somewhere.
Yeah. It's just, our lives are so full of it. If we would just open up and expand our view and recognise how metaphoric so much of life is.
It is, and what I noticed when I first started writing is that I'd put a date in my diary with a chapter. So I'd say, right, I've got a 12 chapter book, I'm going to parcel out 12 2 to 3 hour appointments with my chapters in my diary. And if a client rings up and says, are you free on a certain day? I say, I'm sorry, I'm busy, I've got a meeting with my chapter. And what would happen is that having that meeting set in stone would mean I'd honour that chapter, and the universe would present me with information that was really useful for that chapter just coming up to it. Maybe sometimes out in nature, sometimes in dreams, sometimes I might see a newspaper article or a new scientist article or some research into the latest effects of mindfulness meditation. That's just perfect. And it's the other side of the extended me time state. When you're working in this lovely chilled out way, stuff you need turns up just in time.
And it's working. It doesn't, I mean, whilst it would be lovely to live constantly in this wonderful state, which I have to say I do most of the time, not everybody can. Some people live a much busier life. So it literally, this is crucial to really pull this state of being into yourself, into extended me time for a period of time. And it can be done for those short bursts, like you said, and you work best first thing in the morning, and other people will work best at other times of the day.
Yeah, so if you're a busy mum, you've got to get kids to school and stuff like that, then you're not going to be up till about 9:30 or so, then your life is taken over by other things. And likewise with cooking when they come home again. But no one else can breathe for you, and no one else can love for you, and no one else necessarily, you can get ghostwriters, but no one else can write for you. And so, and I say it's really important that you see your creative time as an essential part of life, because it's the flip side of depression. I had a lovely interview with a lady called Eleanor O'Rourke recently, who's written 2 fantastic books about the descent into depression, and how depression is the flip side of creativity. And I noticed that I'd get grumpy if I wasn't able to be creative, and what it is me getting into a mini depression of not being creative. So creativity it's not just a nice thing to do, it's an essential and vital thing to do. It keeps us alive, it keeps us healthy, it keeps us well. It keeps the flow. Actually, the chi flow comes through our body and energizes us, which is just amazing. And so if you're thinking about, I need to be well for my kids, for example, then I need my creative space. Now, it might not just be I'm writing a book, it might not be right for anybody. It might just be to go and have a creative date, and this is something that Julia Cameron advocates. So she does morning pages and creative dates, which I advocate. Fantastic. Even if you're not writing a book, doing something creative every day is a good thing to do. Keeps the neurology alive and this sort of stuff. And it's not a nice thing to do, it's an essential thing to do.
Now, Tom, it would be interesting, while we're stretching time, have we got time right now for you to show us exactly how to get into that state and the zone, if you like?
Oh, good idea, yeah, absolutely. And there is an infinity of time. So I want to try, one of my missions is to dispel this idea that we haven't got enough time. When you think you haven't got enough time, you won't have enough time. But you've probably experienced that thing where you think you're late for a meeting, you're driving somewhere, and somehow you get there just in the right time, and there's a car parking space right outside, right? But if other people will think, well, woe is me, and I'm going to be late, and by golly, they will be late, and there won't be a car parking space, and all. So I believe that the universe is a kind and benevolent place. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here to even experience it. The key to open that lovely flow state is this meditative state. So I recommend people do a sort of like a formal meditation every morning, which is 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and there's loads of free meds. I've got loads of free meditations on this new app called, it's an old app, but it's new to me, Insight Timer, and I've just put loads of meditations up there, little 10-minute treats and this sort of stuff where people can just get into that lovely state. It's called Insight Timer.
It's a lovely app, actually, yes. And I know that your meditations in particular are being extremely well received, aren't they?
I had no idea. I always thought that I was a writer that wrote meditations as a bit of an accessory, but it's now clear that the meditations can stand up by themselves, which is a real joy. Which is what propelled me to do all the audiobooks. Funnily enough, I like many people, when we hear our voice, we hear it through our cheeks. So I think I sound like a really whiny John Richardson kind of character, but obviously, bought myself a new mic with lovely bass and all this sort of stuff now, so obviously it's different when you hear it back through electronic means. Anyway, I digress. But so this the meditative state with your eyes open is really simple to get into. So what you do is both feet flat on the floor. And so you put your hands on your belly, breathe in, so your middle finger just touches, you breathe in so the middle finger parts, and then you breathe out fully, and if you like you can have your mouth open slightly, about 4 times as long as the in-breath. And you do that about 4 or 5 times. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. Then what you do is you find a spot on the wall. It can be anything, it can be a blemish, or it can be I've got a magnet here, and you stare at it. And then you let your attention just wander around. So even though the spot on the wall is in the centre of your gaze, your attention goes up and below the left and the right. Okay. Just let that sit. And then you imagine that your consciousness goes to the centre of your brain. So you're looking at the back of your eyeballs, which are looking at the spot. And then you allow it to widen still further, so you see the wall and the floor, the ceiling and the floor beyond, and then all the walls around you. So it widens still further. And when you're in that state, it's very hard to think. Your thoughts tend to go to nothing, and then you start writing. Simple as that.
I absolutely adore that state. It's pretty impossible to have any negative thoughts. There's a very clearing, calming, glorious way to be.
Yeah, and there's a pack of meds. I call it pack of meds, which I'm going to give a link out at the end of the talk for Alliance of Independent Authors members, and it's got Getting in the Zone meditation, which is about 15 minutes. I think 10 or 15 minutes long, which takes you through that process in a more formal way. Yeah.
Okay, that's lovely. That's I think everybody will find that of great use, and it's marvelous for doing all sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, actually, and this is you use it also when you're not writing, but when you're doing your creative marketing as well. Right. So it's universally applicable. Also brilliant if all hell is breaking loose around you. Let's say the kids have come home from school and everything's kicking off. If you're calm, then it's a great way of keeping everyone else calm as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It does make a huge difference. And I remember teaching it years ago to a client I had, and she thought I was, her mind used to go when she was quite busy. And she used to go to work on the bus. Mm-hmm. And she started doing this on the trip, on the bus to work. Mm-hmm. And after a week, she came back to me. She said, "Oh my goodness, that really works." I went, "Yeah, it's amazing." She said, "But you can do it anywhere. Nobody knows." I said, "That's right." Yeah,
and there's actually something a bit more magical that happens as well. When you move your consciousness to the centre of your brain, which is your pineal gland, this is where external inspiration comes in. It's also a misconception that most thoughts are generated inside our brain. Our brain is as much a receiver of thought as it is a generator of thought. And there's a mode I got into when I didn't know this when I wrote my first book, that 100 Years of Inventory book. I discovered that what I'd done was channel it, and at the time I thought someone told me you channeled it, and I said, "Don't be mad. That's like mediumship and talking to the dear departed." It's not. It's about tapping into what we call the collective consciousness, and this is something that Carl Jung postulated on, and many other people before and since, that we're all connected together in a web of thought, if you like, a super consciousness, and in that consciousness is not only past memories but future memories as well. I interviewed a lovely lady for the Zone show called PMH Atwater, and she's written a whole book on future memory, which is just a stunning book. And future memories are things like Leonardo da Vinci tapped into future memories when he invented the helicopter, and he drew the helicopter and he drew the parachute just in case the helicopter didn't work. This is like a future memory leaking back in time. And so some people I work with channel angels and archangels and fairies at the bottom of the garden, and I'm fine with that, but I'm very agnostic about what channeling is. And I think that we're just tapping into this collective consciousness. And one of the sources in that collective consciousness is a future version of us who knows the words we haven't written yet. And whether it's active imagination, over imagination, or whatever, if you imagine that there's a future version of you that's got a copy of your book in their hand, it being written, what I do with one of the other meditations I got is I get people to tune into that person, and you channel your own self in the future. And again, you're in this lovely time state where everything just flows as well, which is great.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
absolutely wonderful. And Tom, is all of this within your book Blocks? Because you have a book called Blocks, don't you?
Yeah, no, actually, Blocks dealt with that stuck state.
Right.
It does. I think it mentions the whole mind. It mentions the whole brain state. It mentions the whole mind state and this sort of stuff. But I got into the channeling stuff when I wrote the book after that, which was The Art and Science of Lightbulb Moments. And yeah, and one of those, half of that is how you get the idea, and then the other half is how you ground it. And then I wrote more philosophical books about it all later on, about how it all works, and also what happens when it doesn't work as well. So and actually, pretty much since that book, everything I've written has been channeled, and I've got a course on it as well. So I've got a whole online course which is available again with a lovely discount for Ali members too.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that's something for everyone. You'll have links and everything for people to.
I'll pop that down the bottom here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We keep talking about the Zone. Was it the Zone show that was that one of your light bulb moments? Because you've got this phenomenal podcast that you have every week called The Zone Show with I don't know how many listeners now.
Oh, well over 100,000 listeners we went recently. But actually, one of the things we do as a writer is not plagiarism. I look at other people that are successful and I copy the successful aspects of what they do. And I've always been a great admirer of Joanna Penn. One as a writer, a very successful writer, but also she's run a podcast for years. I've been lucky to be on it a few times, and she's been on my show. And I thought, I need a podcast. A podcast is really good. And what it does, it allows you to connect with people you wouldn't normally connect with as guests. Their tribe finds you, and your tribe finds them. So it's my way of helping other authors out, and my way of getting other authors to help me out. And as a community, we grow together, right? And so I've got a great following now in the USA that I wouldn't have without the podcast. And the Zone is really the thing that I'm about, is getting people out of that stuck state into the flow state. So there's a book about it, there's a podcast about it, and then the books since then go into specific aspects of that zone. So I've got a book on how you extend time. I'm just about to write a book on a new updated book on lightbulb moments, on ideas, and also one about how you generate money as well. And I'll probably write one about how you find your soulmate and a life that you love and all that kind of stuff. These are all spin-off applications from being in this lovely flow state. Because what happens when you're in the flow state, the life that you love finds you. A great example of that, by the way, was when I finished my book, Flavors of Thought. The day I finished the last chapter, I opened up my email and there was an email in from Completely Novel, who I've used ever since my books, saying, we've just started this service. if you got a book uploaded. And that email arrived the very hour that I'd finished the first draft. So I just uploaded the Word document as a first draft, got a book back so I could actually see it in book format, and then edited it down from there. So that's what happens when we're in this state. We're in this lovely... it's a magical place to be, where resistance isn't there anymore. Our blocks have disappeared, and it's our blocks that creates the world outside that gives us the resistance. So it's this vicious spiral down. I want to get people all in this spiral up, if you like. Anyway, so yeah, Zone Code podcast. I recommend, if you're an author, get yourself a podcast on theme. Loads of topics to do. It's great fun, great networking. I'm a bit obsessive. I do about a podcast a week. But if you just do like one a month, then after 12 months you've got 12 podcasts. I've also got people that are podcasting and taking their podcasts, groups of podcasts, and making them into audiobooks. So they're actually monetizing their podcast. So I've got one guy, he's done 36 podcasts about entrepreneurship, and he's taking the 12 podcasts that relate to startup into one book. Then he's going to get the next 12 that relate to midlife of a company where they get stuck. And then he's going to do another 12 which are companies that have got out the other side. So his podcast becomes also a revenue generator.
Fantastic. Yeah. Very nice.
And it's very nice, especially for authors. If you're a bit shy of standing up on stage or being on video, then a podcast is a nice way of doing it. You can be in your slippers and your dressing gown while you're podcasting.
You can even put your lippy on.
stay in your garret and just don't show yourself the world. It's a great way of getting global reach. And
actually, this is one thing that you're now providing as well on the Zone Show, isn't it? For all the authors, all these books are about to be appear.
Yeah.
If people aren't very sure or haven't done podcasting before, you have a service.
Yeah, I do a thing called a bookcast where I read the book, I review it, interview the author about it, and we can time it around the book launch and the promotion and this sort of stuff. And it also a great way, if you're interested in podcasting, a great way to learn the craft is to be podcasted, to be an interviewee first, and then you learn the craft of interviewers and this sort of stuff. So, and I take great pleasure in, and I go into that flow state. I take great pleasure in asking questions that no one else has thought to ask before. But I'm in the eyes open meditative state. So what happens when we're in the conversation, it seems like we've had a conversation for hours. And also the people that listen to it also get entranced by it, because me and the interviewee are in this lovely flow state. And that gets picked up by the person listening to it, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so bookcasts doing, and there also there's a little offer there for Annie members too for a bookcast. I put a link down there.
How lovely! And if people, how else can they work with you?
I do still do. Don't do it so much anymore, but I still do creative unblocking sessions. So if someone's really stuck, I'll work over Skype, and I can unblock anyone in an hour. So if you find that just getting into the meditative state doesn't help, if you find the meditations that I'm providing as a freebie don't help, and you're really stuck, sometimes the trauma is very deep. And I work with people also that it doesn't matter if past lives are real or not real, but if you imagine that they are, I work with people that go right back in time and removing trauma that goes back many, many lifetimes, if that's your thing. And sometimes people have had awful trauma. They've had awful things happening to them, Worked with one guy that's been in Afghanistan, and again we use that technique of changing the first person to third person. But he needed to write that book to get to the other side of where he was.
I think that can very often be the case. And sometimes there are books that don't actually need to be published per se. It just needs to come out. Exactly.
I've done that many times where someone's just written the book and it's never appeared on Amazon, and then they've moved on, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. No, writing is such a balm for the soul.
Indeed. What a lovely thought. That would make a great book, Jackie.
Okay.
There's your book title, all there.
No, my next book is Loneliness.
Well, there's a Zone Show interview slot in September free if you want to come on it then. There you go.
Okay.
And all you've got to do is get into that lovely timefulness state, and it'll just pop out.
It will. It's partially there. Well, it's probably all there. It's just waiting for me to actually pick up my pen and write it.
Fabulous.
So, Tom, that's marvellous. Thank you so very much for sharing your life, your journey, and all the hints and tips that you have given everybody about beating blocks and fostering flow. And I feel sure that many people will be benefiting from hearing your words today.